Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Catchlight Show. I'm your host, Bob McClenahan, and I have a very, very special guest with me today, Doug Kaye. It's truly an honor for you to come on my little show here. You're almost a celebrity.
Oh, no. No.
Really. You truly are. And so anyway, I'm really glad that you came on today to discuss something that has been on my mind a lot lately. I'm tired of lugging this and this around with me wherever I go. That's a lot of extra weight. I'm not sure how much these things weigh, but it weighs quite a bit.
It does.
And they get in the way. I'm constantly banging them on people's heads
and you're
and
often
else.
carrying both of those at once.
Yes, absolutely. Because you never know when I'm going to have to, reach in or get a wide shot or something like that. So. This is a Nikon D810 with a 70-200 on it, 2.8, and this is a Nikon D800E with a SB910 flash and a 24-70 2.8. This is pretty much standard when I go out shooting most events. If it's going to be really dark, then I might switch lenses to a couple of 1.4s, but. For the most part, that's what I carried with me all last week shooting the Napa Valley Film Festival. And
I remember those days.
Yeah, yeah.
A couple of weeks ago, I shot the Blue Angels with a D4S and a 200 to 400 f4 zoom.
Did you have a monopod or tripod?
No, they move too fast. You can't shoot them with that. But I had a wrist brace. I carried a wrist brace because I did it 2 years ago without the wrist brace and paid the price for a week.
Yeah. Well, that's monster. I mean, that lens is. I mean, that lens is like bigger. It's probably as big as your arm, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It comes with its own suitcase. Put it that way.
There you go.
All right.
So anyway, that's really why I've got Doug on here today, so that I can just talk to him instead of B&H about maybe what I should get next. So first and foremost. What are the differences between the good old-fashioned DSLR versus a mirrorless camera?
The first thing is they don't have mirrors.
Hence the name.
Hence the name. Hand me one of those for a second.
Sure.
I'll give you the basic thing. So if you look at what's in this, Bob, the main thing is that as the light comes in here, there are two mirrors. The first mirror reflects the light up into the pentaprism and then into the optical viewfinder.
Right.
But below that is another mirror that takes some of the light and reflects it downward.
Right.
And down in the bottom of the camera is where the autofocus sensors live.
Right.
So in this camera, the autofocus only happens when the mirror is down and in the way.
Right.
When that mirror flips up, you don't really get autofocus, at least not using these sensors.
Right.
Whereas in the mirrorless, the sensor is right here. That's the sensor, there's no mirror, and the autofocusing is done by the sensor. The main image sensor, there's not a separate thing. Now the advantage of it is that it's much more accurate because that sensor obviously has to be registered and this camera has to be the same distance away as the image sensor. In this case, again, the autofocus is done by the image sensor. The disadvantage is that it doesn't have as good a technology for autofocusing in most cases as the big DSLRs does.
As far as focus tracking goes, or is it more just the phase detection versus contrast detection, or how?
Yeah, that's right. Phase detection versus contrast. So most of the mirrorless cameras have what we call contrast detection only, which is what we have in live view with these devices.
Which is very accurate, but again, it's very slow.
Exactly. And the problem with contrast detection is it generally can't tell whether something's out of focus unless it moves the lens. Right. Because it says, how do I know if it's in focus or not? Well, I have to move the lens and see, does it get better or worse? If it gets worse, then it was back the other way.
Right.
The question is how far? I don't know.
Right.
Phase detection allows it to say, how far is it out of focus and in which direction? And so with phase detection, you can autofocus quickly and you can track because you can predict. But now what's happening is, with cameras like this one, which is the Sony A6000, Alpha 6000, they're putting phase detection sensors built into the image sensor. They actually steal some pixels and craft out little bits of space to put in phase detection.
Oh, so it's right on the chip.
It's right on the sensor. That's right.
Wow.
And you don't know it because obviously when they finalize the image, they have to fabricate those few pixels.
Right.
Because they don't get image reception from it. So one of the biggest difference is autofocus. And I must say that the mirrorless cameras are coming along very, very well. I think within 1 year, they will be every bit as good as the best DSLRs.
Okay. So I should hold off then for a year.
Well, we say the best camera is the one that comes out right after you buy one.
That is, oh my God, that is very true.
Right? So there's
yeah.
no good time to buy a camera.
That is very true.
Right.
Otherwise, you just kind of go broke.
I mean, in the film days, you didn't replace a camera because
No.
what if the technology changed, you bought new film,
Right.
right?
Right.
Tri-X is out. Great, we'll go to Tri-X,
Right.
right? But now the differences are in the bodies. And
Right.
so updating every year, 2 years is pretty common.
Yeah. And obviously, in the mirrorless world, the technology has been advancing much quicker than in the SLR world.
Yeah, why is that though?
Nikon and Canon, I think they're complacent. Or maybe they're working on something in secret that's just going to be totally awesome. But I have a feeling it is just the fact that this is what they make.
Well, that's it.
This is Kodak.
Well,
Yeah.
Kodak is going to become a verb. Somebody said
Right.
the other day, right? They're going to Kodak themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, out of existence.
They refuse to innovate, and they're going to get eaten up by these smaller camera companies who have something to prove, something that sets them apart. Sony for years made SLRs.
Still do.
They do.
The A99.
Yeah, I didn't know they still made those.
Yeah. All the A-mount cameras. These cameras from Sony use what's called the E-mount.
Right.
But they're doing a lot of development still with the A-mount as well, which is their A99, A77 line.
Okay,
so
so I thought those were all pretty much gone, and those have been replaced by the new.
No, they're still doing it.
Okay.
They have actually more lenses in that line than they do for this line.
Another thing I wanted to talk to you about. So I have, 13 or 14 lenses for my Nikons. There's certainly not that sort of variety for any of the mirrorless systems.
I would disagree.
Whereas,
I disagree. In the Micro Four Thirds, there really is.
Okay.
If you get the Olympus and the Panasonic.
Okay.
They really, because they have a standardized lens between them, that's
Okay.
the Micro Four Thirds standards, they have, there are probably 50 lenses that are made for that mount
Okay.
between those two.
One of the things that I use occasionally, but I do use it, it's a fisheye. Did they make fisheyes for mirrorless?
They do have fisheyes.
Okay.
The problem is, it's not a mirrorless so much, it's a sensor size issue. So in Micro Four Thirds, the equivalent field of view, if you had a 15 millimeter fisheye, let's say you had a 9 millimeter fisheye.
Right.
And you wanted to get that same field of view, it'd have to be 4.5 millimeters.
Right.
Right. Which they make them almost that wide. And they do have real fisheyes. But when you get a smaller sensor, to get the effect of a wider angle means you have to have a much wider angle lens.
Okay.
So it's a challenge. But that's a matter of the small sensors in Micro Four Thirds. This camera is a full frame sensor, same size as these guys.
Right.
But there's no native fisheye for this.
Okay.
Right. There's no Sony or Zeiss fisheye that. Of course, do your fisheyes autofocus or are they fixed focus?
They autofocus.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not that you need them to focus
They
very
don't do
much,
much, right.
But yeah, they do. They do.
Yeah.
And another lens that I use quite a bit is actually when I do a lot of architectural work is a tilt shift lens. Any tilt shift lenses for mirrorless?
No, but here's something to remember. If you take a look at these two cameras again, what you'll notice is what we call the flange distance.
I can't believe how much difference there is in size.
Yeah, well, I don't have a big zoom lens on it.
True,
Of
but-
course, I've got one over there I could pull over. But the distance between the flange and the sensor here is about 40 millimeters.
And is it the same with the two bodies, with this
Well,
one and this one?
that's the point here, is that in this camera, the distance from the flange to the sensor is only 20 millimeters. It's half the distance because there's no mirror that has to get out of the way, okay?
Okay.
Well, what that means is that to make any lens, a Nikon lens, work on this, all you have to do is push the lens out an extra 20 millimeters.
Right.
So I have in my bag over there a $20 adapter that is nothing but a spacer, right? So I can use any of my Nikon lenses, and I still have a number of them, on this body. I lose autofocus, and I lose the ability to accurately set the aperture. That's a long story. But the fact is that I can use any of them, and I have a macro lens, a 105 macro that I use a lot. It's a Nikon lens.
So
I use a 16 to 35 that I took to Iceland, and I used on this camera.
okay. So like in a pinch, you can use. I could use any of my Nikon lenses on the Sony camera.
That's right. You would give up autofocus, and you would give up precisely being able to set aperture.
Even if there's a manual aperture ring on the lens?
Yeah. If you have a non-G lens, if you have a D lens or something like that, then yes, you can set the aperture correctly.
But there's still something
But on a
wonky
modern lens like this has no aperture ring.
Right.
And so you can set it wide open very accurately, stop down very accurately, or somewhere in between not so accurately.
Okay. But it's probably a situation where if you can take the time to compose and focus and do all that, you can go with putting a Nikon lens on the Sony body.
Right. For example, people doing landscape work on a tripod. Now I do street photography with it. One way is to use a very wide angle lens where I pre-focus everything.
Right.
That works easily. I've also gotten pretty good. Anybody who's used Leica gear, for example, is used to manually focusing their lenses using a rangefinder or something. And I've gotten pretty good at doing manual focusing. These cameras also have something called focus peaking, which helps quite a bit. Focus peaking allows you to actually highlight in red through the viewfinder or on the display all the edges of things that are in focus. And that makes manual focusing really a dream.
Yeah. Actually, I always wondered about why these cameras don't come with the pen prism. Like back what I learned on how to focus. You twist it until the lines line up.
Yeah, those old screens that you could replace, or you could just.
But I really wish that these cameras had that, because there are times when this thing cannot focus for some reason. It's just too dark or whatever. There's nothing to really focus on.
Yeah.
So it'd be really nice to have that. But anyway, that's a whole other story. So what? So obviously you went with the Sony system.
Yeah.
And why did you go with the Sony system over the Fuji, the Panasonic, or the Minolta?
Olympus. Yeah. Yeah, because there are 4 vendors in this mirrorless market. Sony makes cameras that are full frame sensor or APS-C, which is the middle size. Fuji makes all APS-C cameras. And then you have Panasonic and Olympus. Panasonic is also Lumix, and they make cameras in the micro four thirds, which is literally 1/4 the area of the full frame sensors. If I were probably starting from scratch for my taste, I'd probably go Fuji. I love their cameras. I love the controls. I love the aesthetic of the way their cameras work and feel. I actually have one here, a brand new X30, a very low end.
Is that the one you're currently testing?
Yeah, I'm testing an X30 right now, just about done with it, and it's a non-interchangeable lens, real nice little camera. It's like $600 for everything, lens, body, the works. Pretty nice. But the one thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to be able to use Leica and other M-mount lenses, and I didn't want to spend $7,000 for a Leica body.
Understood.
So being able to use these lenses with adapters, this just has a $19 adapter that allows me to use an M-mount lens on the E-mount bodies. I love. And that's the reason I ended up going with Sony. Plus Sony's doing just remarkable things. I mean, this camera shoots ISO 409,600, same as the Nikon D4S. Right. So they're night vision cameras.
And is it? I mean, what's it really look like though at 409,000?
Horrible.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, useless.
Okay.
But at ISO 25,000, it's really good.
Which is actually more important.
Yeah. And your 810 doesn't look very good at 25,000.
Not without a whole lot of noise reduction, that's for sure.
No, so it's really nice. So they have a range. This A7, they have the A7S, which is this one. They have the A7R, which is 36 megapixels. It's essentially the same sensor as in your D810.
Right.
I think that one is made by Sony, in fact.
Both of these.
Yeah. So they have a whole range of cameras, just like you have. Well, you're sort of in that 800 family there, but Nikon has a whole range of sensors and sizes and ISOs and so forth. Sony does too.
Right.
Fuji's real nice from a point of view of controls in particular. Beautiful image quality. As you were saying, we were out having some nice wine before the show.
Yes.
Great lens selection.
Yeah.
Zeiss is making good lenses for them.
Okay.
Everybody.
Yeah. One of the priorities for me, since I do a lot of event photography, is I really want a lens that is very fast. So, and what has really been drawing to me to the Fuji system is they have an equivalent of a 35-1.4 and the equivalent of an 85-1.2.
Right.
And so that with two XT1 bodies would be a much smaller little thing for me to carry. And I'm fairly certain it would be pretty close to the quality that I'm getting with this.
It might do a good job, very much. This 810 is a marvelous camera. It's really hard to beat for a lot of the things that you do. Another thing to consider, though, is the whole ecosystem that these manufacturers have. Nikon and Canon have decades of not only lenses, but strobes and other accessories.
Right.
And that's not the case really for any of these small camera manufacturers. They just don't have the history.
Right.
So, Nikon has their creative lighting system.
Right.
And I don't think Fuji has that, as far as I know. Sony has something starting to look like that, not nearly as good as Nikon or Canon's yet. So, for the professional that needs to depend upon that ecosystem, that's another disadvantage of these little guys.
Yeah,
They're just not quite there yet.
Yeah.
And, I did a review of the D810 recently. I just finished a review of the D750. And although they're big and heavy, they just feel like gloves. It's the sense memory, I guess. I still go out and shoot with them and say, yeah, I know how this works. I know where the buttons are.
Yeah.
It's a solid feeling. And I have, I had a bunch of, I got the review camera. I didn't need a lens. I already had my Nikon lenses.
Right.
I knew them.
Yeah.
It was nice.
Yeah, that was another consideration, is the fact that I have probably five lenses or 5 flashes, plus I have some Einstein strobes hooked up with pocket wizards that are made for the Nikon system. So I've been in the Nikon camp for quite a while now, and I've invested one heck of a lot of money in all the gear, for the Nikon system. So it's really hard for me to make that jump, even though I really want to, and I know that there's a lot of advantages to it, but
no, you can't do it. No,
it's really difficult.
You'll take a bath
Yeah.
if you sell this stuff. The lenses you can sell for a pretty good price. The bodies, of course, don't hold their value very well.
Right.
Pocket wizards and strobes don't do particularly well either. If you want to buy some pocket wizards and strobes, I have some Nikon.
Okay, great.
I have some.
Yeah,
some.
I'm set.
If you
but
need more,
thanks.
you let me know. Right?
All right.
But they don't. No, it's expensive, and plus they're not going to do 100% of what you need. So I think most pros that I know are just sort of starting to add something like this to their kit. They might bring in like a Fuji X100S, which is a fixed 23 millimeter lens,
Right.
And use that for a variety of other tasks. If you do video, these cameras do a much better job of shooting video than what you're going to get out of Nikon. And so you might introduce it for doing that in case some of your event things needed video
Right. Sure.
supplement.
Right.
That's what brings people in.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's something that it's not something that that can replace my equipment, but it's something that I can add to and and still you kind of utilize, and that's
And slowly migrate over,
you know, as
over a period of years.
and just hope that you know, that they come out with the ability to control, you know, offline, you know, off-camera flashes,
Yeah.
you know.
And third parties are doing that. Somebody's making, you know, Chinese strobes for this that have not just triggering, because that's easy, but also, you know, remote, intensity settings and remote control, things like that. They're coming along. But I think anybody who's in your business is probably not going to be able to completely make the jump to this.
Yeah.
But if you do street photography like I do, if you do landscape, if that's really all you do, then you definitely can completely make a jump to this. But you'll also be able to do that with probably a lower investment because, you know, you have to replace a lot of lenses and a few bodies. A street photographer, a landscape photographer might only need one body and a couple of lenses.
True.
So it's a lot less expensive proposition for
Yeah.
them.
Right. You make any money doing street photography, or is
No.
it purely just for fun?
No, exactly. Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah. Oh, you can make a lot of money in street photography after you're dead.
Oh, that's true.
You know,
Yeah.
Vivian
yeah.
Myers done
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
you know,
that's
a whole bunch
right.
of people
that's
have died and have become very famous after their death.
Yeah, that is true.
But it's not. It doesn't pay the rent.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, there you go. So I don't know what I'm going to do now. I still don't know. What
This is no help at all,
But
is it?
But it is through no fault of your own.
Here's something I want you to consider, though. This is something we don't usually show. So when I go out to shoot with my Nikons, here's my camera strap,
Right.
right? When I go out to shoot with my Sonys, here's my camera strap.
Yeah.
So that's another way to consider the difference
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, just you can feel the difference.
Oh, I know. It's amazing how tiny those things are. Honestly, I haven't really even played around with those, even felt them.
Here, you don't wanna play with
It's
that.
unbelievable how. Oh my gosh, they're so light.
Right, and that's an 18 to 200 zoom.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Right?
So anyway, so we got to wrap this thing up here. But again, thank you very much for coming on.
My pleasure. You really made this a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm really glad you could come out. Go check out his website, dougkaye.com, Kaye. And please check out my website too, napasphotographer.com. And thanks very much for joining us today. And we have an announcement.
Oh, yes.
We're gonna
Sneak
do a
it
real
in.
quick announcement.
Quick.
But starting next year, whole new format for us here. We're gonna start doing some tours, and then we're gonna start doing a podcast video thing afterward, where we're gonna kind of be going over the previous day's events, as well as talking about the photos that we all took. Anyway, it's a whole new thing. We'll talk about it a little bit more on next month's episode, but be sure to watch out for that next year. It's kind of exciting. So, and I was talking with him about it. He loves the idea. Mm-hmm. He's on board. And anyway, I think it's going to be really kind of cool. And it's going to be something kind of very unique here in the Napa Valley. So, talk about that more next time. Thank you very much. Bye.